decision to leave and about what the process was like getting out of Russia.
Yeah, I just want to also add about this kind of like strategy of Russia using soldiers as cannon fodder. You know, Russian military tactics didn't really change since the Second World War. Like when I was studying, one of the reasons why I kind of started to realize that there is something wrong about Putin and like Russia, because up to I think when I was maybe 15, 16, I was like pro-Putinist because I just listened to my mom, what she said, and my stepdad. And they just told this, and then I watched this at TV, kind of like, okay, puzzles, it's kind of like puzzles up. So okay, maybe that's right. But then I started to learn history by myself. And of course, I started with the history of the Second World War because this is like the major topic in Russia. That's like what Russia is proud of. And when I started to learn it, I just realized that, you know, it's not like genius victory. We just got more people, and they were using those people many times not in a smart way. They were using those people as cannon fodder. And we have this phrase in Russian that like whatever how many people die, it doesn't matter because the mothers will give a birth to many more.
They can always have more.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cynical. Oof.
Yeah, it's you know, right now it comes to mind all the time with this whole mobilization. So I'm not surprised. Like, I don't have sympathy to those. I have sympathy for those who appear to be in Ukraine in 24th of February, because many of them, I believe them that they didn't know what's going to happen. They were like, okay, maybe it's going to be like training at the border with Ukraine. It happened many times throughout the last couple of years. But those who like stayed there in like June, July, I don't really have sympathy for those people. I know they brainwashed. Yeah, that's right. That's a really big like moral question. Is this okay? Like to guilt people who are just brainwashed or not? That's a really big topic. I don't have an answer myself. But I totally don't feel sympathy for those who came there just to make money, because Russian government, they started to give you like 250,000 rubles, which is about how much is about like
$2,700, something like that.
No, actually more. No, like
more. About $5,000 a month.
Yeah, $5,000 a month.
Yeah,
and Russian average salary is about like $500. So, wow. And Russian people are really poor. Like outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, Russia is a really poor country. I can tell myself because I'm from the Far East, one of the poorest regions of Russia. And those people there, they went there just to make money in a cynical way. Yeah, we're gonna kill people just for money. Yeah, and I don't have sympathy for those. But right now there is a whole mobilization. And Russia, officially, they say we're going to mobilize 300,000 people, but I think it's going to be way more. And there are already some like proofs. There's going to be something about 1 million people.
Yeah, I think it has to be way more, because I know, for example, that Ukraine has about 700,000 men.
Yeah,
right now. If they only brought up 300,000, they're going to get wiped out in a minute. I mean,
yeah. And Ukraine is defending themselves. And, you know, by the theory of war, if you're offending someone, you have to get at least like 2.5 advantage.
Yeah, you're very smart.
I mean, I just heard it many times. So, yeah. You know, I don't know what Putin was thinking about like 21st of February when they were invading Ukraine with like 200,000 people at the border, knowing like, even if you go to Wikipedia or something, it's going to be saying that Ukrainian, like, how do you say, active military is about 250,000. Mm-hmm. So if you're invading Ukraine, you need to have at least like 500,000.
At least, yes.
Yes, and they should be really like trained with experience, with the good equipment, not with the Soviet T-62 who were built in the 60s, like, and the Soviet helmets and vests.
You know, we were capturing or seeing captured Russian soldiers that their first aid kits. The bandages in the first aid kits were packed in the 1950s. They were they were Korean War kind of era. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I know. And this is shortly about Russian army. And myself, like, you know, in the high school in Russia, we had to go through military training in a 10th grade for like 2 or 3 weeks. And so we go to the military base, like a real military base, active one. You cannot take your phones inside, not to take pictures, like real official. And we've seen all this infrastructure. We've seen those tanks. We've seen those weapons they have. And like, just the conditions where the soldiers live,
Mm.
and you just feel like you are back in like 40 years old or like 50 years old back in the Soviet Union. So from those years, I already knew that Russia is not a second army in the world. Like it's
Mm.
just obvious for me. It was obvious for me. And all the time they are showing on 9th of May on the parade, Victory Day, like all this T-90s tanks or like Armata tanks. But this is just like not a myth, but they just as models. There is no massive production. There is no lines for building those tanks. Like
Wow.
there is no infrastructure for this. So
Wow.
basically, Russia right now, I think like this first mobilization is only the first step of Russia getting to the war railways, like as we used to say, like we are changing the route to the war railways,
Mhm.
and Russia needs to build so much like infrastructure to create so much weapon. Actually, before the mobilization, like like maybe 3 weeks ago, I think Russia started to make the laws through the parliament about making companies to how do you say, sorry, English is hard sometimes. To build things for the military, basically. Even if you're a private company, like I've heard that the US also have it like
That's
war
right.
act
Yeah,
or something.
it's called the War Powers Act in the United States, and
Yeah,
it's basically where they can convert industry from making coffee cans to making
yeah,
bullets or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
So they're transitioning to a war footing
yeah,
for the country, and that has major economic impacts on the country. It obviously, a lot of people that I was talking to who were coming out of Petersburg when I was in Estonia a couple weeks ago
mm,
were saying, the war really hasn't affected our lives very much at all. And I'm thinking, well, that's about to change. Uh,
yeah,
it's one thing for a special military operation to take place that doesn't put any kinds of limits on you in your life, but when the majority of Russians start really feeling the pain, and they can't hide the body bags anymore, then it's going to be something different. But I want to get back to how. So, what was it like for you leaving Russia? I mean, did they have no problem? Oh yeah, sure, go ahead and leave. How'd that work?
yeah. So I've left March 3rd. I decided to leave at the like February 28th. So like in 4 days after the start of the war, I was still like, struggling because, I just came back to Moscow from the US. I just moved in an apartment with my friend, with my best friend. We were planning our lives like together, and I was like, my life just started. Like I just settled up in Moscow, and here we go. You just have to lose everything and just go somewhere. You don't know where. So I went. So yeah, I decided to do that. And March 3rd, I flew to Azerbaijan. But of course, I was really paranoid that they're gonna check me at the passport control. And of course, I've deleted my Telegram messenger. I've deleted Instagram. I've deleted everything from my phone except the pictures from the US. I was actually really like doubting. Like I got 4,000 pictures from the US in a half a year, which was like one of the best times of my life so far. It was really fun. It was really
What
like
part of the U.S. were
inspiring.
you in?
I was staying with my family in Minnesota, in
Minnesota.
St. Paul. Yeah, I was
Okay,
studying in St. Paul College for half a
awesome.
year, but I was traveling around the US. I've been to different parts of it. I've been to the South. My aunt, she's living in South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach. So I visited her. I've been to DC, New York City, Utah, many places. Yeah, and I was really debating should I delete those pictures or not, because sometimes I just, when I'm feeling really like depressed, anxious, especially in the last couple of days since mobilization was called out, I just rewatched those pictures. I remember, well, they were really good times. So, you just got to go through struggles and it's going to be okay someday. And I'm really glad that I didn't delete those pictures because, it would be such a big mistake for me. And in the end, I was really lucky that they just asked default questions, like basic questions. What's your purpose? When going to be back? And that's it. I was just lucky, I guess.
Would be a
Maybe
lot
because
more
it was
difficult
flying.
now for sure.
Yeah, oh yeah. For sure, yes. It's another huge topic. So yeah, I left first to Azerbaijan, actually, to Baku, because there are no direct flights between Russia and Georgia because of the war in 2008 when Russia invaded Georgia. And basically, I went to Azerbaijan, Baku, and when I landed at the airport, I was just lost. I was really happy. I made it out. I was smiling, like looking at the people, like, yes, finally I'm free. But then I just realized that, you just came to another country. And before that, I only been to the US abroad. Like, there is statistic that 70 something percent of Russian never been abroad. And up to 20 years, I was one of those people. I've never been abroad of Russia before. And I went to the US, which was not really, of course, it was different from Russia, but still it's like, that's a country where it's kind of easy to be get lost or something.
Mhm.
But like Azerbaijan was quite different, even though it's a post-Soviet country, but still, I had to go through a lot of struggles and stuff. But at the end, I've met so many Russians. I'm sorry, I've met so many Russians who left also. I met my future roommate in Baku who used to live with me in Tbilisi. So yeah, it was hard emotionally, but I made it. So yeah.
And then did you later on decide to go to Georgia from there, or was that your plan all along?
Yeah, it was my initial plan because you can like the only reason why there are so many Russians going to Georgia right now. Well, right now it's a different story because mobilization is called out, but those times, because you can stay in Georgia up to 364 days without a visa, and then you can leave to, for example, Yerevan, Armenia, a neighbor country, come back, and you can stay 1 more year. So basically, you can stay here forever for your whole life as a tourist, but basically you have the same rights unless you just can't work, but that's kind of easy to solve here.
So how do you make a living there?
Yeah, basically I used to teach English or Russian. I used to teach English back in high school, but right now I'm teaching Russian. Basically, mostly to my subscribers, because I used to have a YouTube channel. It was not about the war. It was not even about politics. It was about my life in the far east of Russia in English. Because except Natasha, there are no creators on YouTube on this topic, and YouTube also kind of kept me on the flow. So right now I'm like, because of this war, I'm not teaching anymore because I just feel that it's really important right now to tell the world, to show what's going on in Russia, and to prepare that there can be really, really bad things from Russia coming. So right now I'm like full-time YouTuber, I guess. I'm not like, but still, it's not my initial plan for my life, for my career. No, I want to get.
It's expensive though to live in Georgia, isn't it?
Georgia is pretty cheap. It's not more expensive than Russia. Like the food is cheaper, even though there are so many products from Russia. Like I think half of the products when you go to the grocery store is like from Russia. But the problem is, I think that the Russian government or the Georgian government is kind of not under control, but they are afraid of Russian government. So they can do many things which the Georgian people thinks would be the right thing. And one of those right things would be to actually make visas for Russians to come. And one of the reasons right now is like there are no visas because of the government's being a little bit pro-Russian. So yeah.
Interesting. And they're seeing the same thing in Armenia too, with tons of Russians there. Well, last time I was in Armenia, that like there were more Russians than Armenians everywhere you went. And the Armenians don't mind, they're very hospitable people, but at the same time, they're like, our rents are going through the roof because the demand is up. And so they're doubling and tripling the rents everywhere. And it's really making things more expensive for your average Armenian as well. And so the ripple effects of this are being felt throughout the world. What do you think Americans don't understand about your average Russian, about the people out in the Far East, the people who just live in the villages and things like that? What don't we understand about Russians?
That's a really great question, by the way. I always thinking about it myself. What like the foreigners don't understand about Russians, because I got so many comments like, "Oh, Russians, you're just slaves. Like you just have the slave mentality, and that's it. Like you're done." I don't believe in this. I think that every nation it got through hard times. Somebody sooner, somebody later, some later. But in the end, all the nations they can come to democracy. That's and to the freedom basically. That's the only thing I want in Russia, like the democracy and freedom. Of course, no invading countries. I would say that I'm gonna speak about my relatives, because they are just the most average Russians ever. I'd say that those are the people who were born in the Soviet Union. This is really important because first 20 years of your life is really important for, I think, like building up your view on the world, on your values, on your mentality, like culture and everything. And those are the people who were taught in schools that the Soviet Union is great, that the West is a danger, that the West is our enemy and it's going to be our enemy forever, that there are no, like, all of the independent people who were into humanitarian studies, they were not allowed anywhere. They were sent to gulags, and only, like, there were only some poets and like people who are into art, into literature, into something related to humanitarian. They were like all oppressed basically, and it caused, in my opinion, a really big ethic moral crisis in Russia. It's like, I think that what kind of happened to China, that when they prohibited humanitarian studies in many universities, and they like made a specific percentage of the humanitarian professions and like just places for students to go to study. And I think that's what happened, like, for 100 years since the communist revolution in 1917, Russia having a really big crisis, like moral crisis, ethic crisis, and Soviets, they were killing religion from the scratch. They prohibited Orthodox Christianity, any kind of religion. It's not only Orthodox Christianity, any kind of religion. Then they kind of like made it a little bit easy, but still, people were living without religion. Even though I'm not religious myself, but I really understand the importance of having religion and kind of like being a basement for the society, building morality and ethics, we say ethics,
right?
Like
ethics.
moral, yeah,
right.
ethics.
Yeah. I noticed that when I went to Russia myself, is that Russia is a very amoral place. It's not immoral so much. I mean, there's plenty of immorality everywhere you go, people who just do what they want to do, but amorality where they just don't even think about the future. They don't think about those big philosophical questions about why am I here? Where am I going? What happens after this life? And I think those are very important questions to consider. And if you are taught, and we're seeing the same thing in the United States, we just have a few minutes left, but we see the same thing in the United States. If you're taught that you're an accident of evolution, that everything's random chance, that nothing matters, that there is no right or wrong, it's just a matter, it's kind of like flavors of ice cream. You pick the flavor you like. If that's the foundation of your worldview, you can justify anything. You can justify murdering your neighbor. You can justify killing babies. You can justify torturing puppies if you want to. There's nothing that you wouldn't do, because there is no foundation to your ethical belief. And I think that the Soviet Union, the United States does it a different way. They strip out that foundation in a different way, and that's a whole different conversation. But what I noticed about the Soviet Union was that everything about the Soviet Union was designed to make the person feel unimportant and the state feel very important. So you are nothing. That's why all the buildings are gray and ugly. They won't let you, paint your house a bright, beautiful color, because the only thing important is the state. You are a cog in the machine. You're just a little tiny piece. And I think that the long-term result of that kind of mindset is exactly what we're seeing here. So, hey, thank you so much. I only have 3 minutes left, so I got to run. But Zack, I could talk to you all day. I'd love to hire you sometime to help me with my Russian when you do get back to teaching Russian, because I'm at the point where Duolingo is just not quite doing it for me, and I need somebody to actually explain this stuff to me.
Sure, no problem.
I have to say, you're an impressive young man. And I was raised in a very religious environment. I'm a devout Christian myself. My father was a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. I'd love to talk to you more on that topic, just because to kind of hear about the way you were raised and that sort of thing. But I'm fascinated to learn more about, especially just the regular people in Russia and the people out in the Far East who are so far from Moscow in so many ways, culturally and every other way too. So thank you for taking some time to talk to us. I want to send people to your page. Tell me, give me an address. What's the best way for people to come find you?
Yeah, the best way is going to be like just Zack with a CK the Russian. I will send you the link. You can just click
Zack the Russian on YouTube. I will put a link in the description of the podcast, and hopefully have you on again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chuck, for just giving me a kind of a place to speak out, because it's really hard not to think that every Russian is bad when there are no Russians who are actually speaking out, or just showing that we are just people. We're people. Yeah. Like sometimes we got, like every nation, I think, we got really, really hard times. And this is a really hard time for Russia. And unfortunately, there are so many hard times for Russia for the last couple of centuries. So I hope one day that Russia is going to be democratic. Russia is not going to be invading other countries, and we're just going to be living peacefully with the rest of the world. So yeah, thank you so much again for having me. And
and I do have to say what I always have said as a war correspondent in all the wars I've covered. The thing that I've learned is that people do not go to war. Nations go to war, governments go to war, and the people are the ones who suffer for it. So it's the same in this case as well. Thanks again, Zack. God bless you, and we'll talk to you some more.